إيه نعم.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. ستهين
نبدا الحمد لله.
الحمد لله رب العالمين، وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أرسله ربه رحمة للعالمين. إلهي حق له أعبد المجر، إلهي جا واحد كموي محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم ورسولك إلهي. Today, inshallah, I have about 30 minutes to speak about the role of the Muslim youth in the society and some of the problems and the challenges that our youth face here in the Canadian society. And I looked at the program, and inshallah, the other speakers, the other brothers, they will cover more, they will touch more on the problems of the Muslim youth here and also how to preserve our Muslim identity. I usually like to begin with a hadith from the Prophet ﷺ, narrated by Abdullah ibn Abbas. So the Prophet ﷺ says in that authentic hadith, اغتنم خمسا قبل خمس شبابك قبل هرمك وصحتك قبل سقمك وغناك قبل فقرك وفراغك قبل شغلك وحياتك قبل موتك. So the Prophet ﷺ says in this authentic hadith, you have to take advantage of 5 things before the coming of 5 things. So number 1, take advantage of your youth years before you get old. And number 2, take advantage of your health before you become sick, before you lose your health. Number 3, take advantage of your richness if you have money before you become poor. And number 4, take advantage of your free time before you become busy. Number 5, the last one, take advantage of your life before you die. And I always say that life is very short. Even if you live 60 or 70 years, life is very short. Okay? So we have to be careful about this. The youth years is the best time, the bloom of everyone's life. They say when you start as a child, you start at the beginning of the triangle, like a pyramid. When you become a youth, you go to the peak, and when you start to grow old, you go down. So you have to take advantage of these years. This is the best time in your life. I consider myself privileged to be in Canada. I've traveled to many other places, and I see how Muslims suffer because of the bias, because of the racism in non-Muslim countries, and also, even in some Muslim countries, Muslims who try to practice the religion, they have a miserable life. If you read or heard about Tunisia before the revolution, women were not allowed to wear the hijab. Men were not allowed to go to the masjid to pray. But here in Canada, alhamdulillah, we have this freedom, so we should be grateful for it. The problem is, the more freedom we have, the more democracy we have, some of us, especially the youth, they abuse this freedom. They abuse it. For example, those of us who are born here, our youth, they know the system. They know how the system works. So, for example, the parents who were born and raised outside, when they come here, they try to raise up their kids in an Islamic way. And of course, the kids, the youth, they know the system here, so they are resistant. If, for example, the father is trying to encourage his son to pray, but the son doesn't want to pray, and the son gets bored, he will say, for example, to his parents, you know what, if you keep pushing me, or you put your finger on me, I'm going to call 911, they will throw you in jail. They abuse the system. They abuse the freedoms given to them here. And the kids know, and they tell them at school, if your father puts his finger on you, give us a call and we will take care of him. We'll fix him up. New York style. Okay? So this is the situation here. And I have seen many of our youth, especially in the Somali community. I've been here for almost a year, and I know the situation. Many of our youth, they are lost to drugs, to crime, to street life, and I've heard some statistics about how many Somali youth, they have been shot or stabbed to death here in Edmonton and elsewhere. So we have a very serious problem. And me working as the Imam of the Rashid, people come to me every day. And most of the people who come, they come with problems, okay? Someone is fighting with his wife, a lady fighting with her husband, they are shooting at each other, killing each other off. But many of the problems are related to the youth. Some brothers, they come to me and say, my son has a girlfriend. My daughter has a boyfriend. And I remember one brother in the US, he came to me and he said that his daughter got pregnant by her non-Muslim friend. What can I do? Another man came and said his daughter got married to a non-Muslim man. Is she a Muslim or not? Another time, a brother came to me and he said, my son is doing drugs. What can I do? Another time, some youth came to me and they were in tears and they told me that their Muslim friend, and these youth were Muslim, they said their Muslim friend, who was originally from India or Pakistan, I don't really remember, committed suicide. He killed himself. So people always come to me when it is too late. So what can I do if your son committed a crime and now he is in jail? Or your son killed himself? Or your son is an addict? What can I do? I'm not a superman, I'm just the imam. They always come to me when it is too late. So it is important that we as parents, that we as youth, we start early. We take the necessary steps to prevent the harm before it happens and before it is too late. If something bad happens to the youth, they are not practicing, or if they are lost to the street life or the crime life, I don't blame the youth, I blame the parents. The Prophet ﷺ says in the authentic hadith, كل مولود يولد على الفطرة فأبواه يمجسانه أو ينصرانه أو يهودانه. The Prophet ﷺ says in the authentic hadith, every child is born free of sin, the fitrah, like a blank page, a white page. What the parents basically do, they draw whatever they want on that page. They can make this child a Christian or a Jew or a drunkard or a junkie or a smoker or an addict, or whatever they want. Or a a thief, whatever they want. This is what they do. We form our kids in any way we want. And this is what the Prophet ﷺ says. You look at the parents, most of them are busy. The father working 2-3 shifts to put food on the table. He wants to get rich, so he doesn't have time to teach his kids. The mother, she doesn't know anything about Islamic studies, or she doesn't even know how to say Fatiha. How can she teach the kids? And the parents, now, alhamdulillah, they have enough money. They don't take their kids to the masjid to learn. They don't take them to the Islamic school. They take them to be educated by who? Al-Maghdubi alayhim wal-Dallin. So these are the teachers of our kids. So what do they learn from them? You all know. You will find your kids coming to you talking about Christmas and Halloween and Valentine's and all that stuff. We leave these problems. Also, even if the parents have some time, they are not good teachers. They are not. For example, we always ask our youth and our kids to do things that we ourselves don't do. And we sometimes tell them not to do things that we do every minute. Like the father is a heavy smoker and he is telling his kids, if you smoke, you're an idiot. And the dad is having the cigarette with weed with him, and he is smoking and breathing smoke in his son's face. Or the mom tells her kid, her daughter, if you backbite, you'll go to the hell. And the mother backbites every minute. She's a professional backbiter. Okay? So this seems hypocritical to the kids. They are asking us to do something, but they do something completely different. It's hypocritical. So the parents shoot themselves in the foot. They don't practice what they preach. Also, if the kids go to, or the youth, they go to the masjid to learn, mashallah, they have come a long way. Most of our youth, they don't go to the masjid. But even when they go to the masjid, they don't find a role model in the masjid. They don't have one in the house, they don't have one in the school, in the public school. And even when they go to the masjid, there is no role model. Qudwa. Majru. Qudwa majru. For example, I remember one of the imams in the US, he told me that a few years ago, there were two imams in one masjid, and people split before the khutbatul Jum'ah. So some of them, they wanted one imam to give the khutbah, and the other group, they wanted the other imam to give the khutbah, so they had a fight, okay, in the masjid. So someone wanted to make peace, so he called 911, and the police came. And the people were fighting and screaming and bleeding in the masjid. So the police came in, and the policeman started to walk in the masjid on the carpet with his shoes. So some of the brothers came running and they were mad. Hey policeman, this is bid'ah, man, this is haram. You don't walk on the masjid with your shoes on, man. So what about fighting and screaming and bleeding in the masjid? This is not bid'ah? What are you talking about? This reminds me of a saying that Sheikh Uthman taught me a few weeks ago. When you do something that is not acceptable and there is something else that is done that is also not acceptable. Bakhtiga ma'unu, lakin marati san'abba. I don't eat dead meat, but I drink the soup of dead meat. So you don't allow the officer to walk on the carpet with his shoes, but you allow yourself to fight and bleed in the masjid. What kind of mentality is this? Majaneen, right? Also, most of our masajid, they are not, this is the sad reality, most of our masajid, they are not youth friendly. They are not. Most of the masajid are dominated by the old people, bald, fallen teeth, a cane with 2 feet in the grave. They're always in control. They make policies, they dominate, and they make themselves feel like they own the masjid. The young ones, the youth, they feel like guests. They don't feel welcome in the masjid. And every time a youth comes to the masjid, even if I don't like their haircut or their clothes, I have to accommodate them in the masjid. Because this one guy comes, or this young sister comes, there are thousands out there who never come to the masjid. So we have to appreciate the fact that this brother or this sister, they came a long way. They could have been somewhere else, playing games or moving around aimlessly like zombies. But alhamdulillah, they come to the masjid. There's goodness in them. They have good hearts. This is why they are here. But every time the old people in the masjid, they see them, they starting criticizing them. Now look at this guy. He is coming to the masjid with shorts. Or this sister, she is not wearing proper hijab. Or this guy, you look at his haircut. What do you do with haircut, man? Another time, one brother came to me and look at this guy. Look at this man. He's coming to pray with a soccer training, suit. What is this? Is the masjid a club? I told him, brother, relax. Take a chill pill, okay? Relax. First of all, there is nothing called Islamic uniform, but there is what they call Islamically acceptable uniform. If the dress is decent and it is covering the body, I don't care if you come in a soccer training uniform or a hockey uniform or Santa Claus uniform. It doesn't matter. As long as you are decent, it's okay. And if we start criticizing people at the masjid, and if we only allow practicing people to come to the masjid, this is just like a doctor putting a sign on his clinic that says, if you are sick, don't come to my clinic. It's the exact same thing, okay? The masjid is just like a clinic. It's just like a hospital. Two people come to the masjid. There are healthy people who come for regular checkups, and there are sick people, they come for treatment. If you tell them you are not allowed to come to the masjid, then who is allowed to come? So we should appreciate the fact that these brothers come to the masjid and they come a long way. They could have been somewhere else. The imams is another terrible problem we have in the Muslim community. I have traveled in Canada, in the US, and I have seen many imams, and we had imam conferences. We had one in Texas, one in New York, and we had somewhere between 300 and 500 imams from the US and from Canada, and the great majority of them, they didn't speak English, man. I'm not talking about Somali or Urdu or no English. All they do is give a khutbah in Arabic, and most of the people in the community, most of the people who come to the masjid for Jummah, they don't speak Arabic, man. They speak only English. So you see them, these young brothers and sisters, the youth, they come to the masjid on Jummah, they are being pushed to come because they don't understand a thing, and the imam is talking Chinese or Arabic, it doesn't make any difference, they don't understand anything anyway. So you see the poor youth, they are sitting there, nodding off, falling asleep, digging in their nose, scratching their heads, sending text messages. What else can they do? They don't understand a thing, okay? Or even, alhamdulillah, the imam speaks English, it's a miracle. The imam lives in another planet. There is nothing the imam says in the masjid that relates to the youth. So every time the imam is talking about ikhlas, about taqwa. Ikhlas and taqwa. Ikhlas in the time of the Sahaba and taqwa in the time of the Sahaba. Ikhlas in the time of the Chinese. Ikhlas in the time of the ancient Egyptians. This is the only thing they talk about. Ikhlas and taqwa, righteousness and sincerity. But there is no talk about the problems of the youth. How can we empower the youth? And how can we benefit from this tremendous power that we have in our community, the youth? I remember, even we will answer the questions at the end. The imams, they don't know the Western mentality. Most of these imams, they come from the Middle East, from Egypt and Syria and other places. So they are good for the traditional mentality. They are good for the old people. But when it comes to the young folks, they don't relate to them. Most of these imams, they think that the internet and computers is one of the works of the shaitan. They don't know nothing about the internet or PowerPoint, and they live in another planet. They lived 700 years ago, okay, in the Middle Ages. So they don't relate to the youth. So even when the youth come to them with a problem, they are not able to give a sincere advice because they don't know the mentality, okay? And I'll give a couple of examples, inshallah. The first one, a youth and his father came to an imam in the US. So the father said, it's a disaster. My son has a girlfriend, non-Muslim girlfriend. What can we do, imam? So the imam came to the youth and he mentioned the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ that a man came to the Prophet ﷺ, a youth came to the Prophet ﷺ and says, "O Prophet of Allah, give me permission to commit adultery, zina." So the Prophet ﷺ says, of course the Sahaba, they wanted to snap on him, they wanted to fix him up. So the Prophet ﷺ told him, leave him alone, come close. Would you allow your sister to commit adultery? So the youth said no. Would you allow your mother to commit adultery? He said no. Would you allow your daughter to commit adultery in the future? So he said no. So the Prophet ﷺ says, people don't like and they don't approve of and they don't allow their daughters, their sisters, their mothers to commit adultery. So the man said, okay, Prophet of Allah, I give up. And the Prophet ﷺ made dua for him and he said, I will never commit adultery. So this poor sheikh from the US, he was thinking with that mentality. I know this hadith, if we tell it to someone from back home, they have some Islamic basics, some Islamic bringing up. Of course, this will be enough for them. But our kids here, it's a different, completely different generation, completely different mentality. These traditional answers don't work for them. So the sheikh, the poor sheikh, came to the youth and spoke to him in broken English and he said, my young brother, would you allow your sister to have a boyfriend? So the youth says, if she wants to, fine with me. Again, the sheikh was giving a traditional answer. He doesn't understand the mentality of the youth. The other thing is, before we criticize our kids in the masjid or in the house, if you want to correct them, first of all, you have to say something good about them before you give them the advice or before you criticize them. And this is right there in the Sunnah. There is an authentic hadith that the Prophet ﷺ says that Abdullah ibn Umar is a great man if only he prays some rak'ahs at night. Abdullah ibn Umar was a youth. He used to pray with the Prophet ﷺ Isha, then he would go straight to sleep and sleep all night. So the Prophet ﷺ says, Abdullah ibn Umar is a great person. If he prays at night, he will be the best there is. So he corrected him, he criticized him, but he said something good about him first. So the narrator of this authentic hadith says, Wallahi, from that day on, Abdullah ibn Umar used to sleep very little at night. He would stand most of the night in prayer because of the encouragement of the Prophet ﷺ. So now imagine if you are at the home and the mother or the father comes to the kid and said, you idiot, you are 20 years old and you don't know how to say Fatiha. What's wrong with you? Are you nuts? Wallahi, they would never listen to you. But if you say, MashaAllah son, you have a very beautiful voice, but if only you can work on your tajweed, you'll be the great guy. You'll be like Minshawi or Abdul Basit or Hussein. They will listen to you. If you also do the same thing with your wife or husband, if you want to convey something to them and correct them, you have to say something good first, then correct them. If you want to protect your life. But if you like to be a hero for a couple of minutes, then die 2 hours later, then this is up to you. Correcting people and saying good things first about them is like operating on someone, doing a surgery on someone. Before you remove a harmful object from their body, you have to give them what? Anesthesia. So anesthesia is like good words before you operate on someone and give them advice. And always keep this in your head. The Prophet ﷺ, he understood the mentality of the youth. He knew that if you correct someone in public, especially the youth, they don't like to be corrected. And this is one thing we humans have in common. The youth, they don't like to be corrected. If you want them to do something, you cannot twist their arm to do it. You have to convince them. So there is a Sahabi by the name Khawat ibn Jubayr al-Ansari. He was from Medina, and he was a youth, very young, like 15, 16, 17 years old, and he just accepted Islam. So he was new Muslim, and he didn't know much about Islam. So he went out in a camp with the Prophet ﷺ, and this is an authentic hadith in the book of Al-Tabarani, a collection of hadith like Bukhari and Muslim. So they went in a camp right outside Medina. So in the break, Khawat ibn Jubayr was walking around. So he saw those beautiful ladies chit-chatting to the side. They were non-Muslim, I assume. So he went to them, and when he looked at them, they were beautiful, so he ran to his tent, he put his nicest clothes, and he came back and sat with the ladies, and he started the chit-chat and all that stuff. And having fun. And all of a sudden, Khawat said, I saw the Prophet ﷺ standing in front of me and the ladies. And he said that the Prophet ﷺ was so charismatic when I saw him, I wish that the earth would open up and swallow me, and not to see me in this awkward situation, sitting with the ladies and laughing with them and cracking jokes with them. So the Prophet ﷺ said, what are you doing here with the ladies? So Khawat ibn Jubayr said, Wallahi, I didn't know what to say. The only thing that came to my mind at that time, I said, O Prophet of Allah, I have a wild camel, and these ladies, mashallah, may Allah reward them, are making a rope for me, so I tie my camel so it doesn't run away. Khawat said, Wallahi, I knew I was a liar. And the Prophet ﷺ knew I was a liar, but he didn't say anything. He smiled and left. Then Khawat said, and this is an authentic hadith again in Sahih Tabarani. Khawat said, one day I was walking in the street, I saw the Prophet ﷺ walking in front of me, so I wanted to avoid him so that he doesn't ask me about the camel thing and all that story. So the Prophet ﷺ saw me coming behind him, so he stopped. When I saw him stopping, I started to slow down so I don't catch up with him. So the Prophet ﷺ called me and said, come here, come here. By the way, what happened to your wild camel you were telling me about the other day? So Khawat said, Wallahi, I was so embarrassed, I didn't know what to tell the Prophet ﷺ. Then he said, another day, I heard the Prophet ﷺ was coming behind me. People calling him, giving him salams and stuff. So he knew that the Prophet ﷺ was coming, so he started to walk faster. So he said that the Prophet ﷺ walked even faster than me. He caught up with me. Then he said, come here, come here. What happened to your wild camel you were telling me about? So he said, Wallahi, I didn't know what to tell him. Another time, he said, I was praying in the masjid. Sunnah, tahiyatul masjid. Then the Prophet ﷺ came in. Then the Prophet ﷺ prayed the 2 rak'ahs tahiyatul masjid. Then he finished. When I saw him standing next to me, I knew he was coming for me. So I made the salah very long, so the Prophet ﷺ would get bored and leave me alone. So the Prophet ﷺ came closer to me and said, I've got all day, I'm waiting for you. I said, La hawla wa quwwata illa billah. I'm in trouble. So as soon as I salamed out, assalamu alaikum, the Prophet ﷺ came to me and said, by the way, what happened to your wild camel? So Khawat said, Wallahi, I will give the Prophet ﷺ an answer to put his heart at ease and to leave me alone. So he said, O Prophet of Allah, the good news is, my camel has just accepted Islam, it will never run away again. So he said that the Prophet ﷺ تَبَسَّمَ وَدَعَ لَهُ بِخَيْرٍ. The Prophet ﷺ smiled and he made dua for him. So imagine if the Prophet ﷺ criticized him in public, or that he tarred and feathered him, and he made him an example to the people. He would just run away. He would never come to the masjid again. But the Prophet ﷺ understood the mentality of the youth. I will conclude with the role of the youth in our community, but I will have to introduce this by talking about how to empower our youth. There are 3 things we have to do, and